Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to spend some time with you. I really do enjoy it. And, starting on Monday, we will be back completely live with live phone calls and everything else. Back to, pretty much. So anyway, so what's going on? Like, guys, I have a new show that I'm working on, and it takes like so much of my day. Doesn't take my night. My nights are still committed to you, but I want you to go check out the work that I'm doing over at content.news. We put out a video today that I'm extremely proud of. It's a video where I take apart Donald Trump's tax policy. And these are conversations that we don't really have anymore because it seems to be like we're either talking about Russia or we're talking about neo-Nazis or we're talking about, any other number of things that seem to just come up in our news cycle. But it could potentially be the most boring conversation of the world, in the world, because of the nature of tax policy. It's just boring, but it's so vitally important to everything that we want to do. And the policy that Donald Trump is proposing is voodoo economics part two. And so I did a video with them today, breaking apart Donald Trump's tax policy, and also pointing out how Donald Trump himself thinks that his tax policy sucks. Played a clip from 1991 of Donald Trump basically slamming his current tax policy. And, one thing about it is, though, it's not sexy. Talking tax policy is not sexy, but hey, guys, that's where it really is. That's where the real fight actually is. Like, if you want funding for any program, it's going to be either given to you through tax policy or taken away from you via tax policy. And so Donald Trump is trying to do what everyone knows he wants to do, which is cut taxes for the wealthy. But he's using some very seductive language to rap. I mean, he's doing a good job of convincing these idiots that his tax policy, which is going to overwhelmingly benefit the rich at the expense of the poor and the middle class, he's convincing them that this is some type of populist policy. Now, let's start here, right? We have to fully be aware that the median income of the average Donald Trump supporter during the primaries and partly of the general election was about $75,000 a year. So the average Trump voter is not poor, but the average Trump voter is not going to benefit from these tax breaks. These tax breaks benefit people who make over $250,000 a year. So it's still, they're cheering it on. People who are doing pretty decent for themselves. They're making 75 G's a year, so they're not doing bad. They're cheering on these tax policies as though it's going to benefit them. It's not. It definitely is not. It's going to benefit people. So, I'm not going to bore you with the details. You can get a quick 8-minute breakdown of it on content.news or go to facebook.com, whatever the URL is. But I mentioned all that in context of the new show that I'm doing with them that starts on September 12th called Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon. And it's basically what I do with you guys, but made for TV. We're going to have a lot of different interviews, a lot of different correspondents joining in, and really would love to have you guys to support that as much as you can. And I guess you'll be limited in supporting that if you don't do Facebook. We'll be streaming on YouTube and we'll be streaming on Twitter, of course. But the core audience is on Facebook. We get about every night we get about 1,900 people watching us live. And by the end of the show, we have over like 120,000 people who watched it. One of my clips with content.news, a couple of my clips have gone viral. The most recent one to go viral was the one where I discussed Paula White and her saying that we can't, if we oppose Donald Trump, then we're opposing God. That went viral. We had like over 1.5 million views on that. So it's a good company that they're investing a lot into getting my voice heard. So if you want to see all my professional content, go to content.news. If you continue to, go there, yeah, but definitely keep coming here because I love what we do at night here, which is long format conversations and then feedback from you. Now, I haven't heard from you in about 2 weeks, and that's because I'm still in transition, or actually finally transitioned in. You know, I've got my wife, my kids here. I've got our stuff unpacked and just about ready to cut the lights on in my little mini studio and show you what we're working with here. We should be ready to roll that out on Monday. Actually, I'm sorry, Monday is Labor Day, so we're gonna aim for Tuesday for that. I do apologize. But anyway, so that's what's going on, and that's where you can find all of my new content. You know, I'm not stopping. I mean, I'm actually tripling down on this political commentary, and because, you know, I recognize I have a gift. You know, I don't talk about myself much, even though all of you clearly know that I'm self-absorbed. I don't have to tell you that, but I don't talk about it much. But I'm tripling down on the fact that, you know, this is where I am. This is what I do. This is who I am, and you know, I think it's very beneficial, and I think it's required of us, right? You know, I've built a little audience, and you know, it's a modest audience, but it's an audience, and it's an audience. You guys are influential. You know, us together, the Progressive Army, we are. I mean, we have more influence than our numbers suggest we should have. You know, when we get together, and I'm talking to every single one of you because, you know, in your different spaces, some of you listen to me on YouTube, some of you follow me on Facebook, a lot of you follow me on Twitter. And when we, you know, attack an issue together, we actually change opinions, and we actually have an impact on the national stage, even at this modest size. So together, all of us, what we do together, I appreciate it and I enjoy it, and we're going to keep doing it every night at 9 p.m. The show in the afternoon is uniquely different. It's not long format. We talk about 5 or 6 different issues, fast-paced, made for TV. But what we do here is just have a conversation about topics, and we go into a deep dive. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm preaching to the choir. You know what we do here at the Benjamin Dixon Show. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about tonight is I'm trying to avoid calling her Bae, but Kamala Harris. I know, but first let me do this. Listen. All right, that's enough. Listen, let me tell you why I'm going to applaud Kamala Harris and why I would call her Bae. It's because, folks, if we're ever going to get to single payer, we're going to need people to join our side of the equation. We're going to need people to agree with us. And Kamala Harris is one of the first people, while other people are going in the opposite direction. Now, we'll talk about the stealthiness of this move, and we'll talk about the Bush's word, the strategery of this move. I will, trust me. I'm not a fool. We're going to talk about that. But first, I want to set this out here. You know, if we're going to get any closer to actually making it a reality and not just something that we complain about, or something that we fight for, but something in reality, we're going to have to get and convince people to come to our side. And Kamala Harris, for whatever reason, has come to the side of single payer. She tweeted out last night in reference to her speech in Oakland that she is now going to co-sponsor the Medicare for All bill that has been written by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. I mean, can we, give her a hand. All right, cut that one out too. These are some cheesy ass effects I have on this device, but don't worry, they'll be gone by Monday. But I mean, we're going to need people, you know, people that you may not like per se. And this is let's drill. No, I'm not going to go there yet. I'm not going to punch left. Let me punch right, and then I'm going to punch left. It's going to be a 1-2 punch. Here it is. This is why I understand people's hesitation, because you game this out. It seems like a pretty easy strategic move. No real skin off of her back. This bill isn't going anywhere so long as Trump is in the White House and the Republicans own the Senate. But, you know, and no. Let me finish there. So it's not really going anywhere. So it's a calculated risk, or it could be seen as a calculated risk for Kamala Harris to say, hey, I can come out for single payer, get Bernie Sanders supporters on my side, or at least prevent them from being able to criticize me because, hey, I support single payer, or I support Medicare for all. And if you look at it through those lens, yeah, I guess if you game that out, that sounds about right. And it sounds like a brilliant plan. It sounds like some devious shit that I would come up with. I'd totally do that against you guys. I'm sorry. I'm just saying, like, depending on what role I'm in, if I'm in a political strategist role, I would totally advise her to make that move. Right. But I'm in the political commentary role, so I can tell the truth about telling the truth. But anyway, I digress. So I totally get why people are skeptical of it. I'm not slamming any of you who feel skeptical of it. We should be. I even had to let some colleagues know, I'm like, hey, she has to be careful here, because if Kamala Harris comes out for it and then she has the opportunity to implement it and she does not, that's going to be a huge problem. It's going to be a very huge problem for the Democratic Party in a way that the primaries of 2016 really pale in comparison to. The primaries of 2016 will pale in comparison to the backlash of Kamala Harris playing this type of game where she's only for it so that she can get our support and then she'll be against it. Yeah, that would not play well. Our memories are very long, right? But now, all of the skepticism, and rightfully so, right? I'm not punching love in that regard. I'm not knocking anyone who is skeptical of Kamala Harris' newfound religion of Medicare for all. That set aside, though, it makes a difference that we have one of the quote-unquote rising stars of the Democratic Party to come out in favor for Medicare for all. If for no other reason, right, let's just get petty. It shuts up quite a few people who have been undermining the conversation nationally for Medicare for all, particularly Twitter. A lot of influential people on Twitter who write for various outlets, or their spokespeople for this, or their media consultants for that, whoever they are, they have a lot of reach and a lot of impact, and they have come out vociferously against Medicare for all, particularly because it was something backed by Bernie Sanders, more specifically something supported by the Bernie Bros. And now that Kamala Harris has come over on board, this really shuts them the hell up. What are they going to do now? Attack her? Right? So I would love to see the strategy of what they're going to do. As a matter of fact, this is what caught me off guard. I think a lot of people took my tweet last night out of context, and I could see how. I'm not knocking you. I just, when I said people change they change their tune quicker than a motherfucker. When now all of a sudden, people are in favor of Medicare for all. And everyone thought I was talking about Kamala Harris. No, I wasn't talking about her. I was talking about people that have been tweeting and writing articles negatively against Medicare for all. Democrats writing articles and doing videos to condemn Medicare for all of a sudden. And not only that, but also Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Bros. I mean, they've been attacking us relentlessly. Like, God dog, can you guys take a break? And now all of a sudden that Kamala Harris has come out for it, they're like, oh, well, this is a good thing. Or, oh, this is good that she's teaming up with Bernie Sanders because this is going to be really good. And that's who I was talking about. I really wasn't talking about, I absolutely was not talking about Kamala Harris. And the only reason I point that out is not because I'm concerned whether or not people think I'm talking about Kamala Harris. The reason I point that out is because I intentionally did not say anything about Kamala Harris. I intentionally did not because, well, I think it's fair for us to give her a chance to see what she stands for on the national stage. Of course, we could take a look at her record in California and see that she chose not to prosecute Mnuchin, right? A couple of things that she did over there. There seems to be a lot of controversy with the transgender issue that she was involved in. I'm still researching that because I've heard quite a few different stories on it in terms of the technical side of what she was opposing there, and so I'm going to put a pin there because I don't have all the facts. But despite those two things that are glaring out saying, hey, watch out for Kamala, the fact of the matter is that every politician has a national stage that now that they're on, we need to see what they stand for and what they're fighting for. And, she could have just as easily doubled down with the Hillary crowd and say, single payer is never going to be a thing. And so I intentionally did not have any criticism for her yet because I just wanted to patiently wait and see who she wants to be. Now, again, we could take into consideration everything that she did in California, but we also can take into consideration what she's doing right now. And so that's the only reason I make the distinction as to whether or not I was attacking Kamala Harris last night. Because no, I wasn't. And the reason I wasn't is because I want to see her actions here. I'm not one to get upset because, first of all, I'm not one to get upset because everybody else is getting upset. I'm not. Matter of fact, I actually kind of hate that about the progressive movement is that we find a particular person and that's the person that we target all of our ire towards for the week. It's like the target of the week in the progressive movement. And I kind of tiptoed out of that. I'm like, I'm not going to participate in that. I remember when it was Obama taking the $250,000 speech and everybody was so pissed off about that. That was all that we were going to talk about for a whole 2 goddamn weeks. That's all we talked about. And Obama was this and Obama was that. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm not punching left. I'm just saying for me, I'm like, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me for many reasons. But everybody's like, oh, no, this is a payout. You know, he was waiting. He didn't prosecute. It was a 9-year plan. He ran for office and knew he wasn't going to prosecute Wall Street because he was waiting to get those checks at the end of the day. Never mind the fact that his book deal, it was $60 million. But anyway, that's besides the point. But I remember when Obama was the target of the week of the progressive movement, I'm like, okay, if you guys insist. I didn't say anything to you guys, people who participated in it, because, hey, we don't always have to agree. That don't mean I got to shit on your parade. I could just mind my business, and I did. And then they moved on to some smaller people, less important people, but it always seems to be somebody who jumped up, and this is the person that all of the progressives are going to attack this week. And this is not, hey, let me be sure. This is not unique to the progressive movement. This is the same shit the right wing does. It's the same thing neoliberals do. It's the same thing everybody does. It's like everybody has their private chats and everybody sees something in the news and be like, hey, let's get this motherfucker. So I totally get it. And I'm not knocking you all for that. But I just, intentionally do not participate in that because I'm not really, I guess I just don't like to be, I don't like to move as a group with my anger. I like to evaluate situations individually. And I remember when the Kamala Harris's week came around, I was like, I get it. She's getting prominent on the national stage and everybody's like, oh, well, she's getting prominent. Let's take a look at her record. Let's get her. And then everybody attacked her. And, attack might be the wrong word, but that's the word that came out of my mouth. So I said what I said. Y'all attack. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But anyway, you guys, and I don't know, I'm saying you all because it was a progressive movement that really went after her. And I'm like, okay, I mean, if you guys insist of going after her, I'm not going to say anything about it because you have the right to do that. And I have the right to just, mind my own damn business. And I did. But the reason I minded my business in that and I did not participate in it is because I just don't want to be moving like a group and angry at somebody because, it's kind of like what we're doing this week. Not saying that each of you don't have an individual ability to examine the information and become angry on your own. I'm not saying that you guys have groupthink. I'm just saying I just choose not to participate in that because that's just not my MO. I like to be sure. And I think that's important for me because of the size of my platform. And it's not huge, but it's big enough to get me in trouble. I tell you that much. It's big enough for me to have legal problems. I'll tell you that much. But besides that, I try to walk with a little bit of responsibility and evaluate my anger on an individual basis. And what I mean by that is simply put, I'm not going to be mad at somebody unless I've taken the time to examine it for myself and for them to actually do something to make me upset. And, Kamala hadn't done anything yet to actually make me upset. I didn't like her record in California, but that's not enough for me to make an enemy of her. What would have made an enemy of her is if she came out against Medicare for all. Then I would have had a serious problem with her. Yeah. Then she would have been somebody that I would have tried to rally. I would have done exactly what I said I don't want you all to do. I would have tried to get all of you to be upset with her. I know that's hypocritical, guys, but that's just kind of how it works, unfortunately. I would have been like, hey, everybody, Kamala Harris is trash. We need to take her down, but, thankfully she didn't come out against Medicare for all. And I'm coming all of this long way around to say, one, I'm glad I took my time to evaluate this for myself, because now I have no reason to do anything but examine her based on what she's saying right now today. What she's saying right now today is she's in favor of Medicare for all. And that's so important to people like me and to you, for that matter. We got to have Medicare for all, man. We can't keep going the way that we're going. And we have so many. I mean, think about this. Think about how significant it is for her to do this, right? Whether it's strategic or not, guys, this is what she has done. She has helped us move the football away from Obamacare and the concern about Obama's legacy. And, we can't change this because this is Obama's legacy and we don't want to do that because we got to honor the first black president and all that kind of stuff. And I totally get it. But now Kamala has provided cover for everybody. F Obamacare. Forget that right-wing conservative neoliberal handout to the insurance companies from the Heritage Foundation, Romney Care. Forget that. We ain't even got to we don't even have to tacitly defend that. We don't have to indirectly defend it. We don't even have to tiptoe around the fact that we say that that's garbage. And now we can go for something that's real, which is Medicare for all. You know why? Because the Hillary Clinton / the Barack Obama wing of the Democratic Party, which is represented by Kamala goddamn Harris, has now come to the light, even if it's only strategic. And so you know what that does? Even if she turns later on, she has given us a window of opportunity for the next months, years, for us to run like hell on Medicare for all without even worried about Obama's legacy. Guys and ladies and gentlemen and non-gender conforming people, that's a godsend. That's a give me. Like, come on. I mean, that deserves a corny ass hand applause. Think about that. One of the hardest things we had to deal with even having conversations about Medicare for all with Democrats was the fact that old black people who, and I know I'm talking to a white audience, so I can mix in some white people too, but I'm just going to put it in perspective from the black community. Black people who waited their whole life for the first black president, and then the first black president got this amazing piece of legislation through fighting tooth and nail, and I use amazing, in context of their worldview, right? In context, rather, of their worldview. But, in the back of their minds, like, I don't know, Ben, I could see some of my peoples in my family. I don't know, Ben, that's Obama's legacy. And we don't really want to mess with Obama's legacy. He was our first black president. And sometimes the politics are pretty straightforward like that. I'm not going to call it simplistic because that's diminutive, right? But it's straightforward, right? They want to preserve the legacy of their first black president, because most of them grew up in civil rights era and never thought they'd see a first black president. But now Kamala Harris, who's just as black as Barack Obama, she has provided cover for us to have a conversation about what we should have had in America for the least 30 years. We're 30 years behind on this, people. We should have had single payer, or at least Medicare for all this time. And now we can actually have the conversation without an entire branch of the Democratic Party using Barack Obama's legacy to pigeonhole the conversation. That is all thanks to Kamala Harris. So even if she's just using Medicare for all to use us, we can use Kamala Harris to push Medicare for all. Does everybody understand? You see where I'm coming from? Be suspicious of her, for sure. But don't miss the opportunity that we have right now to run headlong. And then here's the other possibility. She could just be for it. I mean, it's possible. It's not outside of the realm of possibilities. But even if she's just doing it strategically, she still did us a favor, because now If somebody says, well, what about Barack Obama's legacy? Yeah, but Kamala Harris, right? She's the rising star. She might be the next president of the United States, the first woman president of the United States, right? And then the first black woman president of the United States. She's in favor of Medicare for all. What do you have against the first black woman candidate? Well, not the first black woman candidate, but you know what I mean. Shout out to Shirley Chisholm. But you guys you understand where I'm going with this. So anyway, that's why I want to make sure that we don't miss that for the sake of being overly suspicious. Be suspicious, but at the same time, recognize the unique opportunity that Kamala Harris has provided for us. And that's why I call her Bae. I mean, not because she looks good according to some standard European, beauty principles and all that kind of stuff, but because she's given us an opportunity to run like hell with this. I mean, the think tank. I mean, you even got Matt Iglesias from Vox, his cornball ass. He's talking about doing some think pieces, some deep think tank research on Medicare for all. Now it's about to become the thing that all the neoliberals want. And you know what? Good. Fine. Let's just make it happen. I know the devil's in the details, but hell, that's what we're here for. That's what you're here for. We could track the progress every step of the way, every component of the system that needs to be created in order to implement a Medicare for all system. We could track that progress every step of the way, every amendment, every policy suggestion. We could track that every single step of the way to make sure that it's not lost in the details. But do you realize we couldn't have this conversation before yesterday without having half of the entire, or probably 75% of the entire damn Democratic Party jumping down our throats on behalf of Barack Obama's legacy. So Obamacare ain't dead because of Donald Trump. Obamacare is about to be done away with by switching to Medicare for all, thanks to Kamala Harris opening the door. Doesn't mean she's going to carry us all the way. She just opened the door. The rest is up to us. Hope that makes some sense. So anyway, what else did I want to talk about tonight? Where are we at on time? We're doing good on time. The other thing that I want to talk about, well, I already talked about Donald Trump's tax policies. I love tax policy conversations, man. Because that's really, it's two things. It's a statement of your priorities. Tax policy is even greater a statement of your priorities than the budget, because it really tells you where you want to get this money from to run this country, right? And it's super interesting to me because that's where you get to see the most distinct differences between Republicans and Democrats. And I mean, I would be the first to say that it's not a distinct enough difference, right? We're talking about actually, let me take two steps back. What Donald Trump is proposing is distinctly different than what Hillary Clinton was proposing. Donald Trump is considering some draconian tax breaks for the richest people in the country. Hillary Clinton was introducing some modest tax increases, right? So I don't want to go with a false equivalency here that doesn't fit. But for a long time, it was almost maybe 3 percentage points difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And now Donald Trump is moving into a place where he's trying to take voodoo economics, trickle-down economics, Reaganomics, and he's trying to bring it all the way back. And you got to remember, right, the tax cuts in 1986. First, there was the 81 Roth-Kemp, I always say it wrong, tax breaks, where Reagan dropped the top marginal rate down from like 90% down to 25%. It was insane. And then he had to raise it up again. But then 96, they did another tax break, and that triggered a recession. Right? He lowered it so low that ultimately George H.W. Bush had to fall on his own sword and raise taxes in order to keep the government solvent. So we've been here before, and Donald Trump is trying to take us back there again. And so in this way, this is perhaps the most distinctly different tax policy between the Democrat and a Republican that we've seen in a long time. Barack Obama made some marginal changes on the Bush tax cuts, He didn't reverse them all. I believe he reversed them for people making over $250,000 a year. That seems to be the magic number for most people. I guess because it's a nice round number, $250,000. But he didn't make any drastic changes. And now we have Donald Trump coming in and saying, okay, well, we didn't move back to the left anything significantly, so let's push this tax policy Overton window further to the right. And so he's going full Laffer curve. He's going full Reaganomics. And it really is... It's a sight to behold and something that we should discuss more regularly. One of the things that the clip that I played by Donald Trump, that I have an article about it that I wrote. It's not an article. It's a blog post from like 2008. It's still online if you want to Google it. You don't even have to Google it. I think it was one of the last articles I wrote for my first website, bpdixon.com. I wonder if that's still up. I mean, it should be. I've been paying for the servers for years. For a long time. I'm opening my computer to see if it's still up. But anyway, if you go to bpdixon.com, you'll see an article about tax policy, and particularly about a conversation that I had with my brother on the phone, my older brother, on a phone call, and we were talking about the credit crunch, and we were talking about why it is that corporations are sitting on $2 trillion in cash. Right? I had to think about it, but it was cash at the time, sitting on $2 trillion in cash, and nobody could get credit. And you're thinking nobody's getting credit, so they're not going to get any profits off this money. So they're just sitting on this money. And if they're not getting any profits off this, if they're not going to do anything with this money, and they're just going to get they're just going to keep the money, then that means they're going to have to pay taxes on the money. So we're trying to figure out, we're like, why would they be more willing to pay taxes on this money than to turn around and invest this money into the economy or invest it into loosening up the credit markets? And this is, I hope you're not glazing over right now, because this is an important thing that I think not enough people point out. I mean, when I say not enough, I don't hear a lot of economists talking about this. And for the longest time, I thought, well, this is just a paltry little observation by a little dude in Florida at the time. What the fuck do I know? I'm not that smart. But the video clip that I found of Donald Trump today pointed out the exact thing that I outlined in this article back around 2000. It had to be 2010, not 2008, 2010, because I was married. And the point that we discovered was you can lower taxes so much for corporations and the wealthy that it de-incentivizes their desire to invest. In other words, it's really simple. Let's say if you calculate, because you could put a dollar figure, you could literally put it. I mean, if you're in business, you already know this. This is not a big deal for you, right? Or in finance particularly, you know this. But for people who may not know, when we talk about risk, you can literally put a dollar figure on risk and say, okay, if I make this investment, I'm going to risk this percentage, right? This is the percentage. This percentage represents the amount of risk I'm taking to build this building, to buy this new capital, to invest in this company, to invest in into the credit market, or to put our funds into the credit market. And what we kind of postulated or posited rather was that you can lower taxes so low that the cost of holding your money, which are your taxes, the cost of holding money is cheaper than investing money, which is your risk. So the cost of holding your money, taxes. If you're just going to hold your money, then the government's going to say, okay, you're not going to do anything with this money. Fine, we're going to tax you. That's literally how it works, right? Or if you're going to do something with that money, you're going to invest in that money, then the government doesn't tax it hardly at all, right? If you, depending on what percentage, right? Whatever dollars you invest, the government doesn't tax that. So the only thing you spend besides the actual dollars that you spend to invest, but the cost of that investment above the actual tangible capital is the risk. What are the odds that you're going to lose that money? So it's a really simple equation, right? And I'm hoping I can make it plain enough to finish the entire argument. But the simple equation: how much does it cost for you to keep your money? That's your taxes. How much does it cost for you to invest your money? That's your risk. And if you lower taxes so low that it's cheaper for people to sit on their money than it is for them to invest their money, well, hell, the smart decision is to let's just pay our taxes and not invest. Because we couldn't, for the life of us, figure out, they're not going to be making any money. Why would they not pour this money back into the economy or into the credit markets? Why would they not invest? And why are they firing people? Why are there no new jobs? Why are they still, they're not even investing in themselves. They're not investing in themselves. They're buying back their stocks. You know what I mean? So they're not really investing in themselves. And we couldn't figure out for the life of us, but it's sitting right there, dead smack in our face. And it's simply because it's cheaper for them to hold their money than it is to invest their money. So how do you stimulate the economy through increasing taxes? Well, you increase taxes and give them the opportunity to not have to pay taxes if they spend that money on investment. It's very simple. And I have not heard a whole lot of people discuss that. And for the longest time, I'm like, well, maybe I'm just, maybe my analysis is just wrong. And it could still be wrong for that matter, because using Donald Trump as an example of being right is not really the smart thing to do right now. But in 1991, Donald Trump made the exact same argument before Congress. In 1991, Donald Trump went to, and argued before Congress and complained about the lack of investments in the housing market. And he used the exact same example. He said, we've lowered the rate of taxes for the wealthy down to 25%. Right now, today in 2017, we're considering lowering it for corporations down to 15%, just for comparison's sake. And he said in 1991, he said, we're lowering taxes down to 25%, and we have de-incentivized investments. Now they have no reason to go and invest in the housing market because it's cheaper for them to sit on their money. But if Congress raises taxes, then people are going to say, hey, I have a choice to make. I can either invest in my company or pay the government taxes. And you know what most people do in that situation? They say, hell, I'm going to invest in my company. I'm going to grow my company and kick my tax burden down the road. At least I'm growing. And so that's the same observation that he made in 1991. And so now I'm sitting back and I'm like, well, hell, maybe my idea back then wasn't as dumb as I thought. And I'm sure there are volumes of books on this, right? I'm not trying to suggest that this is a novel idea. I mean, hell, I just gave an example of Donald Trump saying it in 1991. But what I am saying is that not enough people, politicians, or public figures speak about this, because we are underneath this inane assumption that the way to stimulate growth is by lowering taxes. But nobody talks about the fact that if you lower taxes so low, it's actually cheaper for companies to keep their money and sit on their money than it is to invest in their business and to invest in the economy. Therefore, you're not growing the economy. You can lower taxes so low to the point where you hurt the economy. Because what do people do? Skeletor pointed it out on Twitter, and Coulter. She pointed it out. The wealthy set on their money. They did not invest. Credit markets have loosened up significantly since the 2007, 2008 recession, right? But there's still corporations who are sitting on, all right, here's another example. Think about all the cash that corporations are sitting over. I believe it's a tax inversion. I forgot the technical name of it, where they put their money in shelters overseas, right? And they put it overseas because the tax burden is so low in the country in which they keep their money. But the money just sits there, right? Because if they take it out and they invest in whatever country they take it to invest in, whether it's the United States or not, that money is going to, actually, let me correct myself mid-thought, they're going to have to risk that money. So anyway, long story short, before I get too lost in the details, because I'm not an expert in this field, clearly, right? But the observation is still holds true, and Donald Trump himself made the same exact observation before Congress. And before Congress, he made the case that we should raise taxes, and raising taxes will stimulate the economy. How? Because nobody wants to pay taxes. And so instead of us just giving that money to the government, what do? We invest in ourselves, and the government doesn't tax it. That's how the government incentivizes investment. They don't incentivize investment by lowering taxes so much, and then companies can say, oh man, well, we got $2 trillion. We have $2 trillion. Well, not one company, but we have $2 billion in the bank, and the government's only going to take like 15%. That's the new marginal rate. That's the new rate, rather. But the effective rate might end up being 3%. So why should we invest this money if the risk is going to be 10%? Much smarter people than me in the audience. Bust that up, break that down for us. I'm sure I'm fudging some of the language a little bit here and there around the edges, but I still would stand behind the principle, and even more so, right? Donald Trump, the president himself, argued this before Congress in 1991. And I think if we got that talking point down and we began to insert that logic into the national conversation, then we can begin to argue against trickle-down economics, which they try every year. Every time they get in office, they try that shit. In reality, it's completely, it's all, there's a balance. And here's the balance, right? Here's the problem with the Laffer curve. I don't know if you know what the Laffer curve is. I'm sure a lot of you do. Many of you may not, but Google it. The Laffer curve is the thought. What's the best way to describe it? It's the intellectual precursor for trickle-down economics in terms of actual policy. And it was created by Arthur Laffer, who was an assistant to President Ronald Reagan. And as the story goes, they were sitting at dinner one day, and Arthur Laffer pulled a napkin and he drew a standard bell curve. And everybody should know what a bell curve is. If not, Google it real quick. And he used the bell curve to convince Ronald Reagan that voodoo economics is the way to go. This is actually before Reagan was president, mind you. He was still running against George H.W. Bush. But anyway, as the story goes, is he draws this bell curve. And if you know the bell curve, it's at its peak in the center. And it's at its lowest point on the left end of the curve and the right end of the curve. And he argued if the government charges 100% taxes, which represents the far right of the curve, if the government charges 100% taxes or levies 100% taxes on GDP, then the government doesn't get anything. It gets nothing, right? Because nobody's going to work. Why would anybody work if they're going to give up 100% of their salary of their wages to the government? And he said, likewise, on the opposite end, on the far left, the government taxes at a 0% rate. And so he argued that if you tax zero, then you're going to get nothing. Of course, a lot of people are going to be making money, but the government's not going to get anything. And he said the optimal place that you want to be is in the center, where you maximize revenues to the government, maximize the amount of taxes that you take up. Right. So off the Laffer, it seems logical, right? It was logical enough to convince, or is logical sounding enough to convince Ronald Reagan that that's what he should do. But here's the problem with that analysis. Republicans have always, it does not matter what the tax rate is. Republicans have always argued that we're on the right side of that curve, suggesting that taxes are too high. And so if we're always arguing that we're on the right side of the Laffer curve, then the Republicans always have an argument to say we need to lower taxes to stimulate the economy, to stimulate growth. And then the subtext is, and if we do that, we'll also stimulate revenues, tax revenues into the coffers. In reality, there's no documented, there's not a single a quantitative study that demonstrates that we are even on the right-hand side of the Laffer curve. And forgive me, guys, I hope you're not glossing over, because this is the stuff that we really should be dealing with. This is the stuff where we get the arguments and the talking points to fight back against conservative ideologies like trickle-down economics. But the fact of the matter is there's not a single solitary quantitative study that shows the shape of the curve, for one. It could be shaped like any goddamn thing. But then two, that the fact that we're on the right-hand side of the curve would suggest we should lower taxes to come into the center. For all we know, we could be on the left-hand side of the curve saying that our taxes are too low, and that if we raise taxes, we will stimulate more tax revenues for the government. But beyond that, the thinking is the exact same if you draw that parallel to where is the sweet spot for investment. Where's the sweet spot for investment into the economy to create jobs, right? That's the language. How do we create jobs? And they always swear, well, we just lower taxes, we can create jobs. Lower taxes, we can create jobs. Lower taxes, we can create jobs. Well, motherfucker, we lower taxes so much that we finally found the sweet spot for the rich people where they'll say, hell, our taxes are so goddamn low, we don't even have to invest anymore. We could just sit on our money. Because unless you are like a serial entrepreneur, or unless you're just a bright-eyed, investor, and just like this is just a new world for you and you're super enthusiastic about it, nobody really wants to put their money on the line. Why put your money on the line if your money is safer just paying taxes, or if it's cheaper for you just to pay your taxes? Especially when you just inherit it from dad, you inherited it from somebody else, so I don't have to do it. I can just sit on my money. I could just spend my money. I could just put my money into some stocks and some bonds and some mutual funds or whatever, and make sure that it grows at a healthy rate. And yes, that's considered a type of investment, but that's a savings. That's savings investment. That's not investment into creating jobs. There's no direct connection to job creation when we talk about cutting taxes, not if we don't even know what side of this curve we're on. That's then they always say, oh yeah, well, it's going to be done in savings. We found a place, and I want to emphasize this. We finally found a place since 2008 where it did not matter how low we cut taxes. It stopped stimulating the economy. And yet, Donald Trump now, even though he knows this, he's known this since 1991, Donald Trump now is saying, let's lower taxes. Well, dummy, you said it in 1991. There is a level of taxation so low that it de-incentivizes investments. All right, I think that's all. I mean, I can go a lot further, but considering I don't have any notes in front of me right now, and I don't want to fudge any more technical terms. Yeah, I don't want to mess with economic terms, macroeconomic terms. I don't want to fudge it. I just wanted to give you the general picture, and next time I'll do it with notes so I could be more precise and more correct. But that's the whole point. That's what my video was about today. So go check that out on content.news. I think you'll enjoy it. It's short. I did what I did here in 30 minutes. I did there in 8 minutes. But that's where we are. And I think it's vitally important that as progressives, we understand that this is where the fight really is. I mean, unless you're still sitting and waiting. I mean, okay, I'm about to punch left a little bit here. I might as well. What's a night with Benjamin Dixon and when he doesn't punch left a little bit these days? I will punch left here and say, unless you're sitting around waiting on the proletariat revolution, this is where the real fight is, inner tax policy. And I only brought that up not to just be coy, but because I literally saw somebody say the reason they think Kamala Harris is still trash, even though she came out with Medicare for all, is because they don't feel that socialism is ever going to come through the government. And I was like, hold on. That means you do not want to make progress unless we have the proletariat revolution. I'm sorry. I've got medical bills that I would like to have Medicare for all for now. So if you're telling me I have to wait until the proletariat revolution to get a solution, you're pretty much the same to me as Christians who say I've got to wait to the afterlife in order to have my reward and my joy and my happiness. I'm good. That's fine. You guys can go ahead and wait for the proletariat revolution if that's what you're waiting for. But as for me and my house, we're going to fight in the world realm of tax policy. And we're going to fight in the realm of politics so that we can convince people, the next person. Who's the next person we have to convince and let them know that Medicare for all is what we need to do? And then there's a whole lot of other people that we need to convince to let them know that we don't need to lower taxes this time around. We need to raise taxes on the wealthiest in this country, and we need to utilize our tax revenues better. Stop utilizing our tax revenues on the military industrial complex, on imperialism, and let's invest in human capital in the United States. I'm out of here.